Today is August the 11th, 2018. We've got some camera news, we've got some camera we thought that it might have been news, and we've got some camera, well, this is just some stuff that we thought we'd talk about this week. Let's get into it. First, well, you know what? Not even first. I'm a little bit done talking about the Nikon mirrorless system at this point. We don't know anything more. There is a new teaser video from Nikon. You can search that out and take a look at it. But in brief, they want to show that they can do arty things with shadows and that they are cool. I don't have much more to say about it other than that. We've got rumors that Canon is going to be announcing full-frame mirrorless. Some people think it'll be the first week of September. But what I really want to talk about here is Photokina, which is coming up at the end of September. Normally, there's not a ton of pressure on a company for a trade show like this. Maybe they'll have something new. Maybe they'll have a guest speaker. Maybe they just have some good jokes to tell, or they reprinted their signage. But there's a lot of pressure on Nikon and Canon for this Photokina because Nikon made the announcement that everyone was expecting that they were coming out with full-frame mirrorless. I actually believe that both Canon and Nikon were getting pretty prepared earlier in the year for full-frame mirrorless, but they had an issue, and that was the A7 III, and it totally rewrote the game, and the full-frame mirrorless world went to this 693 autofocus crosshairs covering 93% of the frame, shooting 10 frames a second at a $2,000 price point kind of camera, and they needed to go back to the drawing board and get some of their firmware updates that they were going to push out later into the initial rollout. I think that the A7 III was launched when it was launched intentionally to really put a lot of strain on this full-frame mirrorless Canon and Nikon movement that everyone knew they were going towards. This is actually probably the reason why Sony is in generation 3 of the A7s in such a short period of time. It's to have generation after generation of product development under their belts by the time that Canon and Nikon came out with it. They're trying to take full advantage of the first mover advantage that they have in the marketplace. So Photokina is a key place right now. Nikon needs to come out with a seriously high quality mirrorless camera system, and so does Canon at this point. But Canon hasn't made any announcement, any move, any response to Nikon. But the reality is we really need to see something from them in this space. And as I've talked about before, Canon's really, for a while, said that their mirrorless system was not a place for serious shooters. It was very much just an enthusiast, here's some aperture variable, small lenses, go and have fun kind of place. And that's not where the market is. We're seeing a market for some very serious shooters in the mirrorless environment. So Photokina is probably going to be a big proving ground. Nikon's going to be putting this camera, whatever it is, I think it might end up being two cameras, a high-end and an entry-level, putting that into people's hands to use. Everyone's expecting Canon to have some answer by end of September to put into people's hands. They certainly do not want a holiday season where Nikon is selling full-frame mirrorless and they are not. So this is a big deal. And the other part that no one's talking about at the moment is where's Sony's A7S Mark III? There's no talk, there's no movement, there's no word. Are they waiting to do a product announcement simultaneously to try and steal some thunder? I don't know. I have no inside knowledge on that, but it wouldn't surprise me because we have the R3, we have the Sony A3, we have the A9 still, but we don't have an S Mark III. And I think that if Sony was waiting to really put that out at Photokina in order to put something else out at the same time as this first product announcement from Canon and Nikon, that might not be a bad way to go. Anyway, there's a lot of pressure on this Photokina in a way that there hasn't been in previous trade shows. So this is going to be interesting to see. And now, let's talk about the biggest non-news event that's happened this week. The biggest non-news event this week was that Think Tank and Mindshift announced that they were merging their two companies together under one major umbrella that would be the Think Tank label. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, didn't Think Tank own Mindshift? Yes, they did. This is the announcement that they're changing their website. In essence, Think Tank is bringing the company they already owned underneath their umbrella company and basically putting both sets of products into one website. That's what that news announcement was. And I just wasted 45 seconds of your time rehashing it. You're welcome, YouTube. Also, in the news this week, Nikon announced a new version of their SnapBridge application, which combines Bluetooth and wireless for their cameras. And this time, we're expecting a brand new feature inside of this application, specifically that it works. This week, I also have my first news correction. It's not really a correction, more I made a guess and I was off by a little bit. And that is, last week I made the announcement that Tamron would be announcing a 17-35 full frame f2.8 to f4 lens for Canon and Nikon. The estimate that I had read was that this was going to be priced around $500. It looks like it's going to be priced at $600. And my first thought was, well, yeah, I'd pay that cost difference, and apparently Tamron thought that as well. I still think this is a good price. I look forward to using this lens and telling you what I think about it. When that happens, of course, I'll make a video. Lastly, in the news this week, we had two interesting items that I'm going to say possibly are connected, though they haven't been connected in things that I've read. The first was the rumor, and it is just a rumor, that Panasonic is considering trimming their SLR lineup down to only the GX and GH models, getting rid of things like the G7 out of their lineup. That's a trimming down of their brand. We also had an announcement that Olympus's Q1 report is a loss of 5.8 billion yen. I did a calculation and found that is in the neighborhood of 52 million US dollars. So we have two parts of the 4/3 world that are making announcements of contraction, and this is worrisome in a couple ways. Panasonic makes some exceptional cameras for video. I know a lot of video people who love the GH5. I love the GH5. I think it's an amazing piece of equipment. And the Olympus camera system is a camera system that I like. I think they've got a good selection of pro lenses, especially a selection of f1.2 primes that are quite nice to work with and well constructed. But both camera companies are announcing that the 4/3 market is not everything they expect it to be in some way or another. Now, why might this be true? Well, the first thing is that full-frame architecture is getting so much less expensive. Today, you can buy from a reputable retailer, you can buy an A7 Mark II kit for $1,300. So full-frame architecture is getting much less expensive than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And so that's squeezing where the 4/3 world can live. That's squeezing the place where it can really survive. I think that things like the GH5 with its video capability should be more popular to the general public than it is. But the reality is that it's a very niche kind of product, especially the GH5S, which is very video-oriented and exceptional at its low-light performance. Secondarily, there are limits to the architecture and the low-light performance possible in a 4/3 world. And we're seeing that limit, and we're possibly seeing its top end. The GH5S is getting around it by its dual circuit technology running into the sensor to improve its low light performance. And that's a beautiful thing, but in the end, what other tricks are they going to have to do just to keep competing with newer APS-C technology? I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think a lot of consumers do either. So I'm worried about what these two announcements mean for the future of the 4/3 world, because those are camera systems I genuinely like. I've got a video educational course on my website teaching basic photography, and the whole thing was shot on a GH4. The whole thing. So I really like this system, but we've got some, I don't want to call them trends yet, but we have some not happy signs. So I'm going to be keeping on top of this story, and hopefully the 4/3 world for stills and for video is going to settle into a place of really having a spot for the photography and videography worlds. Anyway, that is the news for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and being with me today. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. It's free. You knew that. Get into the comments if there's a news item that I missed that you want to talk about. I'd love to hear from you. And have a wonderful week. As always, take care.